And with me in the studio is the Reform UK leader and, of course, my fellow talkTV presenter, Richard Tice. Welcome, Richard.
Good morning to you, Kevin. Well, it's very bright outside, but I have to say, the news is not very bright, is it? I mean, it just seems to go from challenging to bad to worse.
I mean, it's more than that, isn't it? This is almost unprecedented. And we saw the two Tory leadership contenders, Rishi and Liz, clashing horns again last night. And I really do get the feeling that they're not quite across how catastrophic this is. I mean, it's all very well saying, oh, here's £400 for every household. By the way, millionaires and billionaires get that money as well. They should have distributed it in a more judicious way, if you ask me, to help the really poor as opposed to the really rich. But that's a nice gesture, but it's not going to touch the sides. People will not be able to afford to live, and we're talking about very soon.
And the thing is, here we are, Friday the 5th of August. It's another month until the 5th of September when we know who's going to be the next Prime Minister. And there's a complete vacuum at government. There's a vacuum in number 10. Turns out there's a vacuum in number 11 as well, because the Chancellor's away, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury is away, and look, people are on holidays. But, I had a call yesterday, which was a really good idea, that actually they should be recalling Parliament and discussing and agreeing the way forward. So we've just got this sort of complete pause, and everybody's sort of essentially staring into the winter abyss. Yeah. And I wonder whether the calls to shorten this leadership contest will grow. I just think over the next week it really could, because it just seems to the news is relentlessly bad, and people are understandably really, really anxious.
And you're right about that. I mean, the Prime Minister's on holiday, the Chancellor of the Exchequer is on holiday, and the Tories, when you ask them, so why is this leadership, it's only between two people, why is it going on for 7 weeks? They go, oh, well, it's a party rules. We have our party. Never mind your party rules. What about the country you're supposed to be governing? You're supposed to be looking after us right now, and you've abandoned us while you all go and sun yourself and get involved in this ludicrously prolonged clash between two people. It's ridiculous.
I said it on day one, and I continue to believe that it should have been much shorter. It could have almost been over by now. We could have been basically into the last week, and then the new Prime Minister could have come in and be implementing what needs to be done, because it is urgent. There is absolutely no doubt about that. There's some really important decisions that have to be made. It's just untenable. You talked about some of the support mechanisms, and they have put it, Rishi Sunak put in place various things, but that was literally, that was based on the numbers 3 months ago. The numbers are relentlessly worse now. I fear they're going to be even worse in October, November time, depending on what happens with Putin and the war in Ukraine. But, there's no good news coming out of there at all. Yeah. So, we have to prepare for things and plan for things to be somewhat worse than they currently are, and it's not sustainable to think that the odd sort of bit of government support is going to cut it. It's not. It's going to require something much more significant.
Yeah, and by the way, what is the Foreign Secretary doing about the mounting tension in the east between Taiwan and China? The Foreign Secretary is busy fighting with Rishi, not really doing her job either. So that's another area of important national business that isn't being attended to.
Yes, and look, she's got obviously a team around her in the Foreign Office, but there's some major things that do need addressing, and it's clearly very, very challenging. And that very point about some of the big foreign affairs, again, really should encourage them to bring this contest forward, to terminate it sooner. It's all by the shouting. It's a done deal. Liz Truss is the next Prime Minister. She's the leader of the Tory party. She wins this contest. I think everybody knows that. She's clearly preparing her cabinet. Well, there just needs to be a bit of honesty and a recognition of the crisis we're in. So I think that's what will happen over the next week, is that the pressure on Sunak will grow. And, yeah, you could argue it both ways.
To concede and just say...
But the pressure for him to concede, the difficulty is that I can't see how he can be a part of her cabinet, given the significant differences between the two of them, and where that leaves him. But it's really significant.
Yeah, nevertheless, I think there might be a phone call saying, if I concede, what could you do for me, Liz? Let's see what happens there. Now, the other crisis we've got going on right now, allegedly, is a serious water drought. Therefore, there are the all too familiar hosepipe bans being imposed all over the country, and these water companies have the temerity to tell us to snitch on our neighbours. There are two things about this. Hose pipes, people watering their plants, it's just literally a drop in the ocean. Where the real water wastage is caused by the water companies. They're leaking 90 million litres of water a day. They're pumping sewage into the sea.
Right.
They're pumping sewage sometimes into internal waterways. Their chief executives are earning a fortune, and they're saying it's rubbish. This is just a facade that they put up. It's all your lot. You're using too much water. Stop using your hose pipes. And first of all, that's not actually going to make any difference. And secondly, don't for God's sake tell us to snitch on our neighbours. We're not like that. We are not a nation of snoopers.
We're not, but unfortunately, this was established by the government during COVID, when actually people like Priti Patel and others were encouraging people to snitch on their neighbour, and if they thought they were breaking COVID rules, and we should not be a nation of snitchers and snoopers. It's a terrible, terrible sort of Stalinist
Soviet
type approach. It really is Soviet.
Yeah.
It's just not right. It's not British. But interestingly, I had someone on from Scotland yesterday talk about water. Let's remember, the Scottish Water Company is actually a not-for-profit company. They don't seem to be having these problems. They don't seem to be having these significant leaks. And of course, there's more water and it rains more in Scotland, but fair enough. But their bills are consistently lower than bills in England. There's a reason for that, because of the profit element. And I think there needs to be a growing debate about the question of public and private ownership of our critical national infrastructure, of which utilities is one of them. I had a great message yesterday from someone who said that the Nord Stream 1 pipeline is 1,400 kilometres long, right?
Yeah.
And they built that between Russia and Germany.
Yeah.
We've had 50 years to build a much shorter pipe from Scotland down to the south for water. And of course, we didn't do it because we don't think long term. So,
did you feel that the water should be nationalised? Because I'm always very circumspect about nationalisation in any circumstance.
There's a real win-win here, where you say, what about a 50-50 joint venture where you get the best of both worlds? You get the best of private sector management, 50% private should be owned by British pension funds on behalf of British pensioners, and 50% owned by the government on behalf of British taxpayers. Then when the company has a good year, the taxpayer benefits as well. And when it has a bad year, everybody, takes it on the chin. I think there's a genuine win-win. And look around, how many other nations have privatised all their utilities? I have to tell you, it's a very, very short list. We've been, I think, the most foolish about it. And, this is critical national infrastructure, and you've got to think long-term about this stuff.
Yeah, and make no mistake, as I just said, this hosepipe ban, it's like a mirage. It's what they put forward to say, well, this is where the water's all going. It's not. Where the water's all going is into the ground, because the water companies are leaking it. And the sewage is all going into the sea and to internal waterways, which disgracefully they put in. And one of the water companies, I think it was Thames, they got fined recently last year for pumping sewage into internal reservoirs. It's unbelievable.
And then there's other water companies all around the country, but particularly in the south, that are grotesquely guilty and have been heavily fined, heavily reprimanded.
Yes.
Time and time again, over year after year after year, and this is still going on.
Yeah, so remember, folks, when they say hosepipe ban, what they're trying to say is don't blame us, it's your fault. And that is rubbish, absolute rubbish. It's their fault. Don't forget that. And in a little while, we're going to talk about the police. Another case of seriously bad police behaviour. 2 coppers up on manslaughter charges, potentially, after treating a one-legged dementia sufferer in the most appalling way. Find out about that in a few minutes. But first, still with Westminster, Richard, Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, breached the MP's code of conduct not once but 8 times. Tell us all about this.
Quite extraordinary. I mean, this really is just bizarre. you can understand someone making the odd mistake, but to be found guilty of breaching the code of conduct, as you say, not once, not twice, not 4 times, 8 times this year, really is. I mean, for someone who's supposed to be a sort of model of integrity, saintly and sanctimonious, it turns out that he's rather sort of footloose and fancy free with his reporting obligations.
And he's particularly keen on his free football.
He's very keen on his free football tickets to directors' boxes worth thousands of pounds, and also the sale of a plot of land for 100 grand, and so the list goes on. Royalties from a book. Look, he's a very successful lawyer. It's one thing receiving these sums, but not to declare them as the leader of the opposition is more than clumsy. It's careless, and you start to think, hang on, maybe he's not quite so competent. He constantly was attacking Boris for a lack of competence, and he was right to attack Boris for a lack of competence.
This is basic bureaucratic organisation, and for a man who wants to be the next Prime Minister of this country, you would have thought he could have kept his own house in order. This is pretty basic stuff. Why didn't he do this? Why did he not declare this? It's not difficult.
As I say, look, I mean, one of them was only a day late, and you can understand that sort of mistake, but this is not once, this is not twice, 8 times this year, as is reported, does seem utterly extraordinary. And you start to, you just have to question the competence of the people around him for someone who's trying to be the next Prime Minister.
And indeed his competence.
Indeed.
Let's move on to the police. The police, constantly seem to be overstepping the remit of their duties. You know, we heard only last week this ridiculous case, or was it earlier this week, of the military veteran who was arrested because he retweeted a pride flags in the shape of a swastika. Not the nicest thing in the world to do, but not against the law. And he was arrested, and he said, "Why are you arresting me?" And they said, "Because you've caused anxiety." That's not against the law. And tell us about this terrible case of the one-legged dementia sufferer who was 93. He's in a care home, and the cops turned up en masse and tasered him. Tell us about this.
I mean, this is utterly tragic in every sense of the word. The 93-year-old sadly lost his own wife relatively recently, and he lost a leg. He's wheelchair bound, suffering from dementia. 93-year-old living in a care home, and absolutely tragic that for whatever reason he was holding a knife, and the care home residents saw fit to call the police. This is a 93-year-old in a wheelchair, tragically one-legged. He
was pepper sprayed.
He was
smashed around with a baton, and then tasered, handcuffed, and later taken to hospital. And of course, 3 weeks later, he died. Not surprisingly.
I mean, you just where is the common sense?
These two officers they've referred them, or the Sussex police have referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. In other words, marking their own homework again.
Where is the common sense here? In what context could a one-legged person, wheelchair bound, 93 with dementia, really be such a threat to police officers that it requires batons and tasers? Yeah. I mean, honestly, I find it utterly incredulous that some common sense, it just awful, utterly awful. And the consequences of this, again, you just lose trust and confidence in the abilities of the police force to do the right thing.
Yeah, they don't seem to be doing that very often at all these days, and I would suggest that whoever wins the Prime Ministerial race, that one of their first duties should be to gather together all the chief constables of this country and bang their heads together and say, for God's sake, start doing your jobs properly. We have 6 constabularies in special measures at the moment. In other words, they've been found to have fallen foul of their duties in a terrible away. In the Met, 60,000 reported crimes not even looked at or investigated last year. In Manchester, 80,000. They're not investigating crimes. Then if you get your car stolen, if you get your house burgled, if you get beaten up in the streets, that's beneath them. Send a nasty tweet and they're down on you like a ton of bricks. It's all wrong, isn't it?
It's just... it really is desperate, actually, and it's just another of our public services. And look, we want to trust our police. We want to have respect for them, and we want to know that they are there preventing crime and catching criminals. That's the fundamental job of them. And I really just don't think that anybody could really seriously consider that a wheelchair-bound, one-legged, 93-year-old man suffering from dementia is a threat to society. I mean, come on, folks.
Yes, exactly.
We are bigger and better than that. We really are. And if that's what our police force thinks is appropriate, then heaven help us.
Totally. We just showed a picture on talkTV of this poor old guy. Didn't look like he could harm a fly. Just before you go, Richard, let's. I mean, basically, the problem with the police is they become way too woke. And wokery is a massive, pernicious scourge in this country. And Suella Braverman, the Attorney General, yesterday declared war on it, and she says that she's got rid of all the diversity and inclusivity officers in her department. But we still know that, for example, in the Ministry of Defence, there are 80 diversity and inclusivity officers. That's another thing that the new Prime Minister needs to get to grip with, to stop the wokery and to curtail the diversity industry.
Let's hope, and it was a significant intervention from Suella Braverman yesterday. Let's hope that this time actually talk is turned into action and that it really does happen, because it always sounds good, and the Tories are very, very good at this. They talk the talk, but actually what I think the country wants to see is that walking the walk, and that all of this nonsense, this waste of spending is curtailed, is stopped. I mean, she was obviously horrified by what she found, the waste of time, effort and resources and money in their department. These
people are like 80,000 a year.
Yeah, and it's not just the money, actually. It's the pervasive energy and the time that it takes that actually should be spent making whichever department you're in work better, work smarter, work faster, with a higher quality output for us, the people that pay their bills, pay their wages.
So that's what I think was one of Boris's problems. He didn't approve of all this, but he just sort of stood by and let it happen. He was too laissez-faire about too many problems, I think.
Well, and look, if you've got really good people in your cabinet running departments around you, but the truth was that he didn't bring in the best that he could have done from the Conservative benches, and I think that was a serious failing. And the best chief execs are the ones who actually, in a big business, what you want to do is you want to get really smart managing directors who are basically better than you, because if they do a good job, they make you, the chief exec, look good and doing a good job. And that's what a prime minister should do. So whoever is the next prime minister, what I hope is they bring in the highest quality people from the Conservative list of MPs into the cabinet to do a good job.
And they actually start cracking down on all of this nonsense. Richard, great to talk to you as always. That's Richard Tice, talkTV presenter and leader of the Reform UK Party.